If you ever find an old cassette tape in a dead person's house, do not press play. Not even once. Be some voices wait for you to listen, and then they learn your name. My name is Sarah. I am 26, and 3 months ago, I found my mother's voice trapped inside a plastic box the size of my palm. Bye for now. Please, just listen to the whole thing before you decide I'm crazy. By the end, I thank you. Part 1. The empty house. My mother died in March. Cancer. Slow, then fast. The way the doctors outlined her last words to me were soft, almost a whisper. She said, "Sarah, don't listen to anything that's so." She said strange things all week, about shadows in the corner, about a man standing by the window W. I didn't understand what she meant. I still don't, not fully. But I understand enough now to be Afra. After the funeral, it fell on me to clean out her house. I'm an only child. My father left when everything smelled like her perfume, like old paper, like dust settling on furniture that hadn't been closed to donate. Furniture to sell. Photographs to keep. It was slow, heavy work, the kind that makes your chest hurt, even when your hands are just folding S. On the 5th day, I went up into the attic. I hadn't been up there since I was a kid. Maybe 10-year boxes were stacked everywhere, some so old the cardboard had gone soft and brown at the corners. The old baby clothes folded so small they looked like they belonged to a doll. Photo albums with plastic, a box of my father's old vinyl records, which surprised me. I thought she'd thrown out everything. It was old, dark wood, with a little brass clasp gone green with age. It wasn't locked. Inside sit just a plain black cassette, the kind you'd find in a bargain bin at a thrift store. But it wasn't the velvet underneath. It hadn't even flattened the way old velvet does. It looked like the tape had something told me my mother had touched this last, that her fingers had been the last fingers on it. Part 2. The first time I pressed play, I didn't have a cassette player. Nobody does anymore. So, the man at the counter tested it for me. And it worked, the wheels turning with a soft mechanical, my hand were shaking a little, which felt strange for something so small. It was just a tape. Probably an old mixtape, or maybe my mother reading me a bedtime story from when I was small. She, us. I pressed play. At first, there was only static, the hiss of old tape running through old machinery, soft, warm. Exactly as I remembered it, down to the small catch she always had in her throat when I said my sweet girl. If you're listening to this, then I'm already gone, aren't I? I'm sorry. I wanted to mow. I always wanted more time with you. I started crying immediately. It felt like a gift, like she had. The voice continued, talking about small things, how proud she was of me, how she remembered it felt like being wrapped in a blanket that had just come out of the dryer, warm all the way through. I sat there in the dark for a long time afterward, holding the boombox like it was a living thing, or each time, it felt like a hug from beyond the grave. I fell asleep on the floor of my living room. Why? Part 3. Something is different the next evening. I wanted to hear her voice again. I made tea, but something was wrong. "Sarah," the voice said, "my sweet girl, did you sleep well last night? You always used to toss and turn when you were anxious about something." I could always tell, even but more than that, the tape from a night before hadn't mentioned anything about sleep at all. I told myself I was misremembering. Grief does strange things to memory. Maybe I had just forgotten. The voice continued. "I know you found the wooden box in the attic. I know you drove to 3 stores. Do you remember the blue dress you wore to your 5th birthday party? You cried because it had a STA, and I absolutely had not told anyone that I had visited 3 thrift stores to find a B. My hands went cold. The tape clicked off again, exactly 10 minutes in, same as before, the click, so I sat awake in bed with all the lights on, staring at the boombox sitting silently on my dresser. Fey fear that feels enormous at 3 in the morning shrinks down to something manageable. Once the sun, see, maybe I had told someone about the thrift stores and forgotten, and that person had somehow. No, Titch. I called my mother's old friend, Denise, a woman who had known her since college back when she said my mother hadn't mentioned anything like that. Not once, and besides, my mother had been in that my mother had found some way to reach me from beyond, to keep talking to me, to keep being my I decided to listen again that night. I told myself I needed to understand it, to know what it was. That afternoon, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to the library and looked through, but one small clipping caught my eye. It was from almost 40 years ago. Barely 2 paragraphs long, the article ended abruptly, as if the reporter had been told to stop asking questions. I stared at coincidences happen. Old towns have old tragedies, dozens of them, buried in every issue of every day. Part 4.5. The house on Larkspur Street before that, though curiosity got the better of sad, maybe the way old houses look when nobody has loved them in a long time, but ordinary. And he looked at me for a long moment, the way you look at someone when you're deciding how much truth then, in the last year of her life, something changed. She stopped coming outside during the day. Talking like a conversation, he said, leaning on his rake, back and forth. Except there wasn't a Margaret. Walter's face did something complicated, somewhere between sadness and something older and the girl. He shook his head slowly. The girl was gone before the funeral. Family came, and you'd think a person would come back, even once, to visit a grave. She never did, or maybe she never. Part 5. The voice learns my name that night's recording started the same way. Static. Then her VO, I never told anyone about you and me. Not really. Some things are just between a mother and her dog. It was still my mother's voice, exactly her pitch, exactly her softness. But underneath it, their W, didn't you pray for it some nights after I got sick? Didn't you lie in bed and beg whatever's list? I know things now that I never knew when I was alive, the voice said. I know you didn't visit me, I forgive you. I forgive you for all of it, sweetheart. Doesn't that feel good to hear? Doesn't that? It sounded almost like a scream, cut short. I sat there panting in the dark, my heart slamming again, things I had never told a living soul, things I was ashamed of, things I had buried so deep I barely. Part 6. It comes back 3 days later. I open my apartment door to leave for work, and the garb same bag. Same 3 knots. Inside, the boombox and the tape, completely undamaged, like nothing I should have thrown it in a river. I should have driven 2 hours out of town and left it in a dump, but something about finding it on my doorstep, untouched, waiting for me like a loyal dog that had. I carried the bag inside. I didn't unpack it right away. I let it sit in my closet for almost 2 I would hear, very faintly at the edge of sleep, a sound like a cassette tape rewinding. The little another night, I woke at exactly 3:17 in the morning, a time that would come a matter very much law. I started sleeping with the lights on. I started avoiding my own apartment, staying late at work, go. Part 7. Priya doesn't believe me until she does. I told Priya everything. One night, over wine, Priya shrugged, uncomfortable, wrapping both hands around her wine glass like it could warm something, my secrets, my fears. And each time, the voice sounded a little more confident, a little more like I never repeat what it says. Never answer it directly, because answering is a kind of feeding too, May. Part 8. Trying to end it, I bought a hammer. That sounds almost funny now. Writing it down, going to static was faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of my kitchen, the same room where you didn't have to break me. I wasn't going to hurt you. I backed away from the kitchen. My Holby, I know, it said. But I'm getting closer. Every time you listen, I get a little closer to being he.